My name is David. At the time of my 39th birthday, I was teaching abroad at an American school in Beirut. I had been working as an elementary teacher for 17 years and had a lot of diversified experience that included 9 years of teaching at inner-city, rural, and suburban public schools in Texas. During the latter half of my career, I had been teaching abroad. I spent 7 years in Saudi Arabia and 1 year in Lebanon. My time abroad was amazing. The lower cost of living and the free or subsidized housing had allowed me to save money in amounts that wouldn't have been possible if I had been teaching in the United States. Living abroad had also made it easier to travel during my annual vacations. Shorter vacations like spring break were spent in Bahrain, Syria, or Jordan. Summers were spent in Europe, Asia, and Africa. During my last Christmas abroad, I cruised down the Nile and spent Christmas Day in Cairo. But all things come to an end. As fun as it was to live and work overseas, I missed not having my own home. After 8 years abroad, I was tired of living out of suitcases in shabby apartments with worn furnishings. The money that I had saved while working abroad had allowed me to pay off my student loan for my master's degree in curriculum and instruction. It had also allowed me to save enough money to buy a car and to still have enough left over for a generous down payment on a home. While sitting abroad in my faculty apartment in Beirut, I used the internet to find a job in Central Texas. The district was looking for highly experienced teachers with advanced degrees to turn around a handful of failing inner-city schools. We were told that we would have 2 years to improve test scores. The district also promised to reduce our class sizes and to provide additional instructional resources beyond those that were given to other schools and to give additional computers to each classroom. After returning to the United States, I put 30% down on a modest 3-bedroom house in the suburbs. I also purchased a Buick sedan. After closing on the house, I spent 2.5 weeks buying furniture and settling into my new home prior to the start of the school year. On the first day of work, a week before the students were set to start the school year, the district superintendent had a meeting with the newly hired faculty. We were told that instead of having 2 years to turn the school around, we would only have 1 year. We were also told that if student test scores didn't improve by year's end, all of us would be out of a job just as our predecessors had also been fired.
You should be thankful that you have a job,
thundered the superintendent.
And if you don't like it, there's the door,
he said as he pointed at the gym's exit. In retrospect, I should have taken the superintendent's suggestion. I should have gotten up and walked out the door because the district had hired me under false pretenses. Not only did we not have 2 years to turn the school around, but we didn't get smaller class sizes. We didn't get any additional resources. Instead of up-to-date computers, each class had 2 Apple IIgs computers which were outdated and so old that their production had ended nearly 10 years earlier. When the school year started, I found that after having given the class an assessment test, that my 4th graders were on the 2nd or 3rd grade reading levels. Most of them didn't know their multiplication facts. At least half of my class didn't even know their addition or subtraction facts. Very few of them knew how to write a complete sentence. Given all of these deficiencies, I decided to start the year with remediation. I taught phonetics, which I reinforced with reading instruction using borrowed books from some 2nd and 3rd grade teachers. In language arts, I taught basic sentence structure, and the use of capitalization and punctuation. In math, I used blocks to demonstrate that multiplication was nothing more than repeated addition. The students also began learning their multiplication facts. This remediation effort was shut down by the assistant principal within a week and a half.
You're supposed to be teaching 4th grade instructional objectives,
insisted the administrator at the first of what would be many meetings. What sense does it make to teach compound multiplication to students who don't know their multiplication facts? I asked. How can I teach students how to write multi-paragraph essays if they don't even know how to write a complete sentence?
Not my problem,
sneered the administrator.
I'm simply here to enforce district policy, and district policy says that 4th grade students should learn 4th grade instructional objectives.
So how am I supposed to teach compound multiplication to students who don't know their basic multiplication facts? I asked.
Let them use calculators,
suggested the administrator. My eyes narrowed. Will they be able to use calculators on their end of the year state test? She shook her head.
No, but then again, that's not my problem.
To get around the administrator's prohibition against remediation, I contacted every parent and guardian in my class and arranged to keep all of the students from Monday through Thursday for 1 hour of remedial instruction after school. The parents were quietly enthusiastic and every single one of my students stayed in class for remediation. This remediation effort lasted for 2 weeks but was eventually shut down by the assistant principal.
What are you doing?
Hissed the administrator when she came to my class after a tutorial session.
You're making the rest of the teachers look bad. I told you not to remediate. I should write you up for insubordination.
I laughed. Insubordination? I'm remediating on my own time. Per your instructions, I am teaching 4th grade instructional objectives throughout the school day.
And now you're being argumentative.
She hissed. Not at all, I replied. I was simply explaining why I was not being insubordinate.
Fine.
Snapped the administrator.
Just remember, I'm watching you. No more remediation.
I made the mistake of trying to take this matter to the principal. The problem was that the principal always seemed to be off campus, for what seemed like an endless round of meetings at the district office. Since she was an old school educator who had started teaching in the years before email, I knew from her personal preferences that she didn't care for the use of email, but instead preferred to receive handwritten notes. When I made the mistake of writing her a note about my growing problems that I had been having with the assistant principal and how she had just shut down my after-school remediation, allegedly because I had been making the other teachers look bad. After putting the note in her faculty mailbox, the note was intercepted by the AP.
Did you seriously think that I wouldn't find out about your pathetic whining attempt to contact the principal?
My heart sank when I saw my note in one of her hands.
Given how the principal is gone for a 3-day in-service at district, the office manager forwarded your letter to me. I cannot begin to tell you how very disappointed I am that you have tried to circumvent my authority as an administrator. Don't do this again, or there will be consequences.
As the weeks turned into months, things went from bad to worse with the assistant principal. She didn't like the fact that I high-fived my students in the hallway outside my classroom in the mornings because this behavior was allegedly unprofessional. She didn't like the fact that I ate with my class in the school cafeteria with my lunch because by avoiding the faculty lounge, she said that I was failing to network with my colleagues. The assistant principal took to dropping by my classroom unannounced where she would loudly critique my teaching methods. She would also comment upon trivial things like the arrangement of my desks or the posters on the walls. Her tone was condescending, and her visits grew increasingly frequent and disruptive. One day she called me into her office for what she referred to as a strategy session.
Your problem is that you're still idealistic and naive. The reality is that good teachers know that modern teaching is a numbers game. If you want to keep your job at year's end, your students will need to demonstrate significant improvement. The best way to do this is to double up on math and language arts instruction. Don't bother teaching social studies, health, or science because these subjects aren't tested. Don't waste time teaching students who are extremely deficient because these children are statistically insignificant. Focus instead upon helping your marginal students to improve.
As I listened to the administrator lecture me on what I needed to do as a teacher to be successful in her school, I felt a growing anger. Who was she to suggest that any student was statistically insignificant? I had spent the previous 17 years believing that all students were teachable. While some students were admittedly more teachable than others, this did not mean that teachers should ignore the needs of students who were severely deficient. If anything, these students needed more attention, not less. I felt my eyes brimming with tears on the long drive home. I wasn't crying because I felt sorry for myself but was instead crying because of frustration and the suggestion that some of my students were statistically insignificant. As I pulled into the driveway, my chest felt like it would explode. For some reason it felt hard to breathe. The world felt as though it was spinning. I collapsed in the driveway and a neighbor called 911. I wound up spending 3 days in the hospital for what the doctor had described as a minor cardiac event. During this time, a nurse drew my blood which was then analyzed by the hospital's lab to see if I had diabetes or other medical issues that might have led to my heart attack. I felt fortunate that aside from having had high blood pressure, there didn't seem to be anything wrong with me. Aside from having to take a blood thinner medication, the doctor said that I needed to reduce the amount of immediate stress in my life. I did not tell the doctor that this source of stress had a name and a job title. I returned to school on the following Monday. After unlocking my classroom door, stepping into the room, and turning on the lights, I froze. This classroom had changed since I had last seen it on the previous Thursday. The desks that had been grouped in blocks of 3 to 4 had been reorganized into old-fashioned rows and columns. All of my made-from-scratch bulletin boards were off the walls. My mind flashed back to the assistant principal's criticisms of my desk arrangements and posters. There was a stabbing pain in my chest and I could feel a vein throbbing in my head. I turned around and left. Since it was 6 in the morning and school wasn't scheduled to start for another hour and 40 minutes, I called the automated system to request a substitute. At home, I retrieved the automatic blood pressure monitor that I had purchased at the pharmacy after having been released from the hospital. After wrapping the cuff around my upper arm, I pressed the start button and waited as the cuff began to tighten around my arm. I sighed when the digital readout showed that my blood pressure was 179/119. I was literally 1 point below the critical threshold that would have required emergency medical treatment for a hypertensive crisis. I called the doctor who had treated me. 2 days later, I resigned from the school district. I quit because I didn't see how I could achieve the district's goal, under the circumstances that had been outlined by the assistant administrator. I wasn't allowed to remediate during class. I wasn't allowed to tutor students on my own time. How was I supposed to teach 4th grade instructional objectives, when so many of my students were missing prerequisite academic skills? The desk arrangements that could have fostered cooperative learning between students was not allowed by the administrator. She had taken down all of my made-from-scratch bulletin boards, leaving my classroom looking barren and unwelcoming. Although the state required that I teach health, social studies, and science as part of our statewide curriculum, the assistant principal had given me unlawful orders to not teach these subjects, and to double up on the instruction of math, reading, and language arts. In short, I saw no way forward. If I wasn't allowed to remediate, teaching would become an exercise in frustration because my students wouldn't have the skills to be successful with any new learning. On top of everything else, my health was at risk. I was so stressed out that I had developed high blood pressure. I had already been hospitalized from one heart attack. I was lucky that a neighbor had seen me and called 911. In addition to having cited breach of contract, my resignation included documentation from the doctor who had written a letter about my medical condition. Although the district could have applied to revoke my teaching certification for having broken contract, they released me from contract without any comment. Towards the end of the school year, I was watching the evening news when I saw a broadcast about my former school. The assistant principal had been caught with a school counselor changing student answers on the state's annual assessment test. Both educators lost their jobs and had their certifications revoked. As for myself, I started a new chapter in my life. I went to culinary school and after graduating with honors, I went into the hospitality management and food service industry. Despite having to work 65-hour-plus weeks that include evenings, weekends, and holidays, my blood pressure is now a much healthier 125/83. I sometimes think about my former career. Although I could have tried working for another school district or even returning abroad, whenever I have these thoughts, I also think about the lyrics to The Gambler by Don Schlitz, the ones that go, "You've got to know how to hold 'em, know when to fold 'em, know when to walk away, know when to run." Something broke inside me during that last teaching job. I think that the turning point for me was after I was told that some children have to be written off as being statistically insignificant. It did not help that towards the end, I felt less like a teacher and more like an educational accountant whose instructional focus was limited to the debits and credits of academic progress and less about addressing the needs of the whole child, which should have properly included cognitive and social skills, identity, behavior, and physical as well as emotional health. While I believe that there should be student testing as a way of requiring school accountability, I believe that annual student progress needs to consider individual student improvement and growth from one year to the next. Students who have gaping academic deficiencies that have been allowed to occur after years of indifference cannot be expected to be on grade level by the end of the school year simply because of a district mandate. In any event, as my former administrative supervisor was fond of saying, this is no longer my problem. Even if you've never been a teacher, have you ever been stuck in a job with impossible expectations? Do you think I did the right thing by leaving education? Let me know what you think in the comments. If you like this video and would like to see more content, please click on the like and subscribe buttons.
Principle so wise and so grand, with your masterful grasp of the lay of the land, you crafted a plan so brilliant, so rare, where ignorance blooms with your indifferent care. Essays from children who can't write a line, it's a vision of progress simply divine. Kids who can't answer what's 2 times 4 must do division while we all keep score. Oh, hail to the leader with plans so grand, guiding us blindly through this curious land. With charts and numbers you weave your tale in the district of chaos. How could you fail? But wait, there's more to your wisdom profound. No after-school help, no learning around, for high fives and smiles are so unrefined. A teacher with joy, you must be out of your mind. Desks in neat rows, a sight to behold. Cooperative learning, oh how very old. In science or health, they're simply a jest. Double up on reading and forget all the rest. Oh, hail to the leader with plans so grand, guiding us blindly through this curious land. With charts and numbers you weave your tale in the district of chaos. How could you fail? Students are where you should aim. Those who are failing are just part of the game. Statistically small, they vanish from sight in your world of numbers where wrong is so right. Oh, my dear principal with vision so clear, your methods are genius, that much is sincere. For when the teacher's heart finally gave way, it was your guidance that nearly ended his day. So here's to your brilliance, your infinite grace. May your legacy shine in this glorious place. For in the annals, education's grand lore, you'll be